While the Atlanta Hawks are officially in the offseason, we are just getting started. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome into episode 1 of Hawksology. I'm Jack Tresh, and before we get into all this madness, you may be asking yourself, wait, what is this? To define Hawksology for you, it's the study of everything Hawks. Not just the players, the coaches, the front office, but also the film, the stats, the stories, the fans. And while I just seem like some college student talking about his favorite team, there's a reason I called it Hawksology, and it's because I legit study this team, and you'll see what I mean as we get into it. Right now, 99% of Hawks fans believe in bogus narratives, and someone's got to set things straight. But here we are in the off season. Everybody's hopping on roster changes, who to add, who to part ways with. And we'll get to that because that stuff answers what, but we seriously got to talk about why and how. And most Hawks fans aren't actually asking either of those questions, and it's resulted in all the talk around this team involving senselessly idiotic roster changes. Well, some of them. But we'll get to roster changes in a future episode. But seriously, we just experienced the most confusing season in Hawks history. So there's a lot to reflect on, a lot to break down that a lot of people just don't understand. And again, that's why so many of them have resulted to pushing these bogus agendas and pointing fingers like they're in the second grade. So we're going to hit the nail right on the head today and talk about the real problems behind this team. And so today we are going to start with the concept of defense. Because if you weren't aware, the stats claim the Hawks as the 5th worst defensive team in the league this year. So if you're hunting the solution to that and saying defense is what we need, that's just exactly like saying food is what you want for dinner. The term is too broad, so it's imperative that we split it up. Can't just keep saying defense. We're going to split it up into defensive ability, defensive effort, defensive IQ, and defensive scheming. Scheming is more of a Nate McMillan thing that we'll get to. But right now, we're going to focus on the players and their two biggest issues, which are defensive effort and defensive IQ. The biggest pitfall that leads to this generalization of defense is the people who rely too much on box score stats and averages. And if this was a crime, there'd be a hefty amount of Hawks fans put behind bars. A fun example of that is halfway through this past season, there was a ton of hate going around at DeLon Wright. People just weren't realizing that what he does doesn't always show up on the stat sheets. And when it came playoff time, first round against Miami, he was arguably the best Hawks player in that series and proved everybody wrong. So anyway, just to remind you, a stats like a player's defensive rating, especially over the course of an entire season, is pretty bogus. Somehow a stat like that was enough to convince Hawks fans that Rudy Gobert is so incredibly far beyond better than Clint Capella. So I hope that you understand this next segment on defensive effort because it'll help you realize that Clint Capella was not the problem. So let's dive into some brutal losses that I still have PTSD from. Keep the scores of these losses in mind. Here we go. We're going to start with this Houston Rockets game back in December. We lost 132 to 126. Eric Gordon torched us. I think he had like 5 threes or something. Shot pretty well from the field. And DJ Augustine, 16 of the team's 44 points in the fourth quarter to hand us an L. Next, we're going to move on to Portland. This was when they did not have Damian Lillard, and they also did not have CJ McCollum, but not because they had traded him. He was just out. So they didn't have Josh Hart or anything. And we lost to them 136 to 131. Anthony Simons dropped 43 points, hit 9 threes. We gave up 36 points in the first quarter, 34 points in the second quarter, 30 points in the third quarter, and 36 points again in the fourth quarter. Now, this loss against the Lakers was watching this with a bunch of other Hawks fans at a restaurant here in Atlanta, and looking back to see that the loss was 134 to 118. Pretty disappointing. Malik Monk and Avery Bradley in just the first half of this game combined for 37 points, 14 for 17 from the field, 8 for 10 from three-point land. And you look at the playoffs this year, and entire teams are barely reaching totals of 37 points in halves. And we let Malik Monk and Avery Bradley do it with their eyes closed on 80% shooting. San Antonio, this loss pretty bad. 136 again. We scored 121. There's a Detroit loss. We lost 101 to 122. And then Charlotte loss. We lost 130 to 127. I believe that was without LaMelo Ball. No offense, the teams I mentioned are not great, but it is fair to say that the Hawks are a completely different team depending on how big the stage is. Is it not a part of this team's culture that when we're on the big stage and the bright lights come on, that we're underdogs and we kick ass? But you ever ask yourself what happens on the small stages? What happens in Detroit and their empty arena against a rebuilding team? Let's dive in, get into some nitty-gritty stuff, which is some shot contest statistics. The NBA, under Hustle Stats on their website, has the number of shot contests per game and totals for the season. Shot contests are not like how many times did a player contest one of our players' shot attempts. It's vice versa. So I'm talking on defense. How many times did any Hawks player go and close out, stick their hand up, etc. This is the NBA's stat for that. These stats aren't perfect, but the approximate estimate is still kind of nasty, as you'll see, because I put it next to their defended field goal attempts, which, if you don't know what that is how many field goal attempts was, for example, Trae Young the primary defender of. And so let's get into it. We're going to start with Trae Young, who played 76 games and 2,652 minutes, and for 838 shots taken with him as the primary defender, he is listed to have 157 shots contested. That's 18%. Nice. But keep that number 157 in mind, because during his time in a Hawks uniform, Cam Reddish in 34 games, 797 minutes, which is almost 2,000 minutes less than Trae played, he contested 156 shots. So 347 shots taken with Cam as the primary defender, and they say he contested 156 of them. That's 45%, which is a lot closer to league average and way better than Trae Young's abysmal 18%. Again, 157 out of 838. So I'm going to put that into perspective for you, because let's say you're playing 5-on-5 and the person you're guarding, hypothetically, they take 100 shots and you contest 18 of them. That is horrendous. And I'm not even expecting you to be able to contest all 100 of those shots. Maybe you get taken out by the screen. Maybe the switch is not credited. Maybe it's a miscommunication on another one of your teammates' faults that leads to them getting an open shot. So in the NBA, if you're under 25%, that's pretty bad. But for Trae Young being at 18%, that's really atrocious. If you want to know what other players on the Hawks look like, I'm going to stick to more guards, perimeter defenders here, because, of course, when you get in the paint, the shot contests are a lot different. It's less of running to close out, more just keeping your position and ground. But Kevin Herter, 74 games, 2,188 minutes, and he contested 374 out of 835 shots taken with him as the primary defender. That is also around 45%. DeAndre Hunter, 53 games, so way less than Trey and Kevin Herter. 1577, 1,577 minutes. And DeAndre Hunter contested 350 shots with 662 taken with him as the primary defender. So 350 of 662, that is 53%, which is pretty good. And friendly reminder, Trae Young was at 18%. We can even talk about threes, and they on the website they split up. They can show how many shots the shot contests came on threes versus twos, and Clint Capella contested more threes than Trae did. If you look at the defensive field goal attempts and look at threes only, there are more threes taken against Trae Young than any other player on our team. Like Trae Young, total of 342. The next highest was Kevin Herter with 313 taken with him as the primary defender. And then Bogdan Bogdanovic, 290. And, of course, Capella's in the paint most of the time. So there were a total of 243 three-point attempts, which is 99 less than Trae had. But Clint Capella still managed to contest 145 out of those 243 attempts. That is 60%. Trae Young only contested 100 out of those 342 three-pointers taken, and that is 29%. I like to think that whether it's a pick and fade with a stretch big, there's a lot of plays where the point guard will hand it off to a trailing big. Watch Wendell Carter Jr.'s highlights against us. Lots of those pull-up threes. Regardless, the fact that Clint Capella has contested more three-pointers than Trae Young did this season, especially because teams like to hunt Trae out with screens off ball, shooters. That's atrocious. So now I'm going to show you guys exactly what I'm talking about. We're going to go to the Film Breakdown, and if you're on Spotify or a platform where you can't see the video, I've taken this part out because you kind of need to see it to see what I'm talking about. So be sure to head to my YouTube. I'll have just the Film Breakdown part itself uploaded as well with the full podcast. But if you're here watching the full podcast, we're going to get into the Film Breakdown. And it's exciting because these are some really, really hilarious but also painful examples. Alrighty, so let's watch some film. I've gathered a couple of really good examples of really bad effort. And these are actually all from plays where three-pointers are made against us. And I left a bunch out as I was sifting through every single three-pointer made against us this season. But I'm sure if you watch plays where like a two-pointer was made, a three or two was missed, a foul was called, they turned over the ball, we deflected it out of bounds, any of that you can find so many more examples of just really, really poor defensive effort. This first play against Denver, before I talk about what's on the court, I'm going to point out the bottom left corner. I don't know if you guys saw that already, but Denver is up 19 in the second quarter. They almost have 70 points in a half, and they are 4 for 7 from three-point land this quarter. So this is a very interesting decision, or just not even thinking moment, no offense, by Trae, as they get out in transition. And Aaron Gordon, that is a rhythm catch and shoot three-pointer, number 5 of the quarter for Denver. But pay attention to Trae. because he's going to give him a little meh right there, wave him off like, nah, no way. But the right thing to do would be for him to run out there, close out, soft close out, because of course you don't want to have the blow by, but try to stop that transition better than just looking and saying meh. Bucket, but of course, terrible effort. Next play against the Lakers right here. This is the first bucket scored in the game that Avery Bradley and Malik Monk absolutely cooked us. Again, 37 points in that first half, 8 for 10 from three-point land, and this was one of them. One of the biggest problems that we've had this season with this bad effort is not just not closing out, but it's fully turning backs, right? Not watching the players off the ball and focusing too much on the ball. And that's what happens here as Trae Young just ignores Avery Bradley as he heads to the corner. Bogey wasn't paying attention to Stanley Johnson, who went up and set a screen on Trae so that nobody would be able to get out to Avery Bradley in time. So as you watch here, Bogey is late calling that screen. Trae Young has no time to turn and react. And Avery Bradley, catch and shoot three, wide open in the corner. Let's see that in full time. Just backs turned. And again, that's an easy shot for basically any player in the NBA. Next clip is against Washington, and this is a little Lou Williams mishap right here, doing the same thing. But this play starts with a screen and handoff Dinwiddie from Montrezl Harrell to Spencer Dinwiddie. And if you notice, Lou Williams' position, trying to act as a low man. Really, I don't think, as much as I love Lemon Pepper Lou, I wouldn't take my chances as him with him in the paint against a Montrezl Harrell that's going downhill. But anyway, let's watch what happens. Splash for Corey Kispert. Lou Williams right here needs to see that Gallo is closing in for some reason and understand that there is not only his shooter open, there's two, so he's got to move instead of just standing there. I'm not really a big fan of the help here by Gallinari because right here, Montrezl Harrell could have kicked it out to KCP, and KCP could have had a wide open three. But that is really not helpful that Lou Williams is just not paying attention to Corey Kispert because 6 seconds, 5 seconds, 4 on the shot clock, and the Wizards get bailed out here. This next play is against the Pacers. We'll just take a look at it all the way through. Splash, wide open three for Chris Duarte. Even though Trae is guarding Brogdon here, Kevin and Trae have to switch here. I'm sure Kevin said switch to Trae, but instead, because Trae does not shift over from here to there, it is a wide open three for Chris Duarte. No one even runs out. Splash. Let's take a look at this next play, and this is, Hawks fans, this has been a lot of negative today, but this right here is actually a positive that I see. And I'm going to talk about Onyeka Okongwu for a second. This out-of-bounds play versus the Cleveland Cavaliers. We're up pretty big, so that's good. Right here you see Kevin Love is calling a play, and Onyeka actually correctly calls out what's happening to Bogey, right? You see him pointing. This is a play that Shady Osman is going to come around, pin down screen, and get a nice catch and shoot three. All Bogey has to do is just be a bit more proactive and beat him to his spot instead of standing and watching like he does. Because there goes Shady Osman, and by the time Bogey starts running, Kevin Love gets in position to set the screen. And so this becomes a wide open three for Cedi Osman. I mean, there was a little bit of a contest, but again, this is the highest level of professional basketball. That is a good enough look that players can consistently knock down. Let's move on to this play, also in that Denver Nuggets game. Bones Highland drives, and Looks like someone fell asleep there as Monte Morris heads right to the corner for an open three. This is another example of our players not paying attention to what's happening off the ball. You know, you could argue that Trae Young was helping here, but it did not look like he attempted to reach anything. He just watches and then finally realizes when it's too late that Monte Morris, or as I like to say, Mont Maurice, has dropped to the corner, and that is a quality look for any NBA player. We'll watch it one more time in full speed. Bones Highland, quick first step, but could have prevented this corner pocket three. Now over to that Rockets game I was talking about earlier, where Eric Gordon torched us. We gave up 44 points in the fourth quarter. And this is just because Eric Gordon had already had, I think, 11 of the Rockets' 16 points. This is just kind of atrocious. As you notice, is that Armani Brooks? Yes. He's going to hand it off to Eric Gordon, and Trae Young is just way too far back. I'm an Indiana Hoosier, so my boy Eric Gordon, that is too much space for him as he cashes out this three-point opportunity. And Trae is just waiting for the 33-year-old Eric Gordon to make a move. But in reality, he's a shooter. Always has been. Knocks it down. Just barely a closeout, too. All right, the Portland game I was talking about. This is Anthony Simons. Must have been a little screen action because Simons gets the switch on Capella. Larry Nance Jr. is starting a role, but Trae Young, I actually give him credit here, does a great job of getting back to Anthony Simons, but not all the way. That is too much space because at this point, he was already torching us, which is why Portland is reaching 70.5 with this three-point opportunity. All Trae Young needs to do here is understand who'd been scoring the majority of points, and that this right here, especially if you're 6'1" and don't have the length to contest. Trae, I know you're fast, right? If you're up on him, you got the speed to recover. But that is not a closeout. Let's head to this game against the Sacramento Kings that I think was right after that Portland game. You'll see TLC turns it over in the corner here. And this turns into a very, very easy transition three for Tyrese Halliburton. Of course, TLC, that's an unfortunate turnover, but not his biggest mistake. The big mistake here is him trying to stick with De'Aaron Fox as they run up the court together. I don't know about you guys, but I'd want to be in front of De'Aaron Fox in transition, not slowly jogging my way up behind him. And so if you look at DeLon Wright, he is the one who closes out, quick reaction and turn on that Halliburton three. But in reality, it's not DeLon Wright who should have been responsible for Halliburton getting wide open. DeLon Wright does the right thing, getting in front of De'Aaron Fox. TLC has got to be the one to turn on the Jets and recover to Tyrese Halliburton. Make a mistake there, he can easily make up that distance. DeLon Wright, great thing to do to stop the ball handler, but instead it becomes an easy look. At least DeLon tried. So the Clippers game in Los Angeles, Zubac against Onyeka, could have called a travel there. Gets Amir Coffey, who was the leading scorer in this game, a wide open, good-looking three. So my problem with effort here is that Bogey is coming to help out the bigger Zubac against Onyeka, but Bogey's got to be more active with his hands, especially right here with his left hand. That is an opening to slap and strip the ball from him, because Amir Coffey's all the way over here and nobody is even close to him. So if he's going to help out, he's got to make it count right there too. Be more active with his hands, get in there instead of just standing, because eventually Zubac knows it's time to make a pass. Wide open three, bucket. I'm going to cap it off here with two last plays, both in the second game of the season against the Cavs. Both involve Ricky Rubio drilling a three-pointer. Let's check this first one out. Drives baseline And yeah, there's Trae Young all the way in the paint. My guy just froze. Rubio gets a wide open, good looking corner three. There's a couple good things I noticed here, not by Trae, unfortunately. I mean, he does a great job of forcing him into the paint against Capella. And Capella, with his expertise, does a great job of not only preventing Ricky Rubio from going up with a shot, but also denying the little pass right there to Evan Mobley, which would be a bit tough. Capella is also responsible for another 7 or almost 7 footer, Jared Allen, right there. But it's also Mobley got that little cut right there because DeAndre Hunter, and this is the right play, made the rotation to the open Evan Mobley over here and took away that option. So the only option that remains here is the person with the ball, Ricky Rubio, who literally does a straight line drive into that corner as he looks and sees Trae is all the way back there and gets a good look. Trae, as Capella helps out, freezes and looks around for a second and then is like, oh, runs out, and Ricky Rubio drills that three. This last play, later in the second quarter of that game, Ricky Rubio catches, and Trae is kind of just slowly waltzing up towards Ricky. And by the time Ricky Rubio's like this, Trae's got to not be looking like he's getting set, like he does there. And then he's like, oh, crap. And it's too late. That is too much space for anyone in the NBA that has a jump shot. That is it's just poor effort. And that's why I wanted to show you guys these clips. Again, there are so many more. These may have all not been the most hilarious or painful to watch examples, but you got to think about it this is the NBA. This is the highest level of professional basketball, and you can't let this slide. So as we talk about effort, it's more than just contesting shots, right? It's running the floor on both ends. The Hawks, fun fact, were the last ranked team in fast break points, both per game and the total amount of fast break points over the course of the season, which, I mean, it's weird to think about that's us. But when you look at the fact that we were a team who let the ball go in the basket more than we should have, that not everybody was where they needed to be or 100% locked in all the time, it makes sense that we're not getting wide open breakaways or even 2-on-1s or anything like that. So it's on the offensive end and still the defensive end. We still got to get back on defense. Effort also involves communicating and playing as a unit, right? In the film, you saw a lot of just ball watching, not paying attention to players that are off the ball. I'd assume that unless you're boxing out, you should never turn your back completely onto the person you're guarding. Just doesn't make sense. One other thing that goes with effort is being more proactive on screenplays so that it absolutely doesn't flatten you when you run into it. If you see it coming, just get in front of it. Don't let it get set and then try to fight over. Be active, be proactive, and make a play, beat your defender to the spot if you have to. Communicate with the hedge defender, or if you're the hedge defender, communicate with the person who's guarding the ball, who's about to get screened, even off-ball screens too. This is again the highest level of basketball in the entire world, and honestly, you can kind of coincide defensive effort with defensive intensity. There's so many times where we give up stare down threes or jump shots because we just stand in front of the person and they go, okay, your hand's not up. This is too much space. You're not moving your feet. I'm just going to rise up for a jump shot. And it burns us. I'm not saying, because on the other end, we watch Kyle Lowry literally out there committing horrific acts of violence. But, at least he's got heart. We'd rather just give up like 6 threes to a player who averages like 4 points a game in a quarter. At the end of the day, it's not okay because it's against a team with a bad record. Okay? It's not okay to just waltz around screens or give up open threes to that guy because he only signed his first contract. Like, I'm telling you guys this, and it doesn't sound real. But again, the evidence is there. And especially because now you look back to Trey's comment that came not even 10 games into the regular season, where he said he was bored. To be exact, he said, "It's regular season. I'm not going to lie. It's a lot more boring than the playoffs. You got to find the motivation to play like the playoffs." And then you look at the saying, when we get blown out in Detroit, because it's an arena with no fans against a lottery team, we get blown out because that effort's not there. It's shocking because the same team is going to play to their competition level, right? We're about that big stage. We are. And so we're going to highlight a couple wins because these are against really good teams, and these aren't all the wins we had against some of the better teams in the league. In fact, both times we played Phoenix, we competed with them. Milwaukee, I think we beat them twice. I only have one listed here, but let's look at this list and you'll see what I mean. And all of these games that I'm about to mention are only some of the examples where we've held teams below the league average 110.6 points per game. So there's Milwaukee that we played, beat 120 to 100. Keep the scores in mind. Right, Dallas, 113 to 87. That was the first game of the season. Against Charlotte, when LaMelo did play, the other game I mentioned, LaMelo Ball was not on the team. We still, or he was injured. We still gave up 130. This Charlotte game with LaMelo, 113 to 91. Against Boston, 108-92. Against Toronto, 127 to 100. Against the Clippers, 122 to 106. Against Boston, 110 to 99. And against Charlotte, again with LaMelo, 110 to 105. Again, lots of these games were on national TV. It's like we're putting more effort in the bigger games, but again, this is the NBA. You got to have that effort throughout. That's the challenge of the regular season. But I mentioned that league average 110.6 points per game. The Hawks are 24 and 12 when we hold teams below that average. And you look at that list of teams I just mentioned and the fact that I could find way more games this season where we competed with good teams. And on the flip side, so many games where we played pretty lackluster against pretty bad teams. And I guess that's just the thing about the Hawks stage, and when not, the switch is going to be flipped. But quick sidetrack, if you haven't yet, head to my YouTube channel, because another episode of From the Floor is on the way. If you don't know what that is, that's I've taken over 350 courtside videos at Hawks games this season, and honestly more than that if you go to prior seasons. And so if you go to my YouTube channel, Hawksology, you can watch, the one up now is a minute straight of Clint Capella dunks that I've captured, and the one I'm working on now is all ice tray. But anyway, let's talk very quickly about the other big frustration, and that has to do with defensive IQ, specifically overhelping. Because there's too many times where we let the other teams get quality looks because we are the ones that bail them out. Let Capella and Onyeka Okongwu too, let them do their jobs. Believe it or not, a good amount of our steals come when someone drives and tries to go up against one of our bigs. Capella especially is so good at altering shots and forcing players to make tough passes mid-air. And when we don't overhelp, we're in those passing lanes, we get steals. Like, especially coming baseline, like we're on defense, and players come in baseline and runs into Capella. They're looking right at the weak side corner for a shooter. But if someone is there where they're supposed to be, focusing, making sure that weak side corner shooter is not wide open, we're in those passing lanes. That's a tough pass and most likely a turnover. But instead, so many times, just like there's bad effort, there's overhelping. So trust in the bigs. Let the players on offense run into those walls and either get swatted or turn the ball over instead of allowing them to find bailout passes to wide open shooters. So other than that, I guess I did have some overhelping film that I was going to break down for you guys. But now I'm thinking that I'm going to save that for the future because it'd be pretty cool to show you guys overhelping and then correlate it with moments where we don't overhelp and we get, for example, a steal in the weak side corner or force a really tough pass that's a turnover out of bounds. But other than that, that's all we got for episode 1 of Hawksology. I'll get that film breakdown probably out separately on YouTube, but expect me to also hop on that roster changes and free agency and draft train pretty soon. That stuff gets me fired up. And we'll do some stuff too focused on individual players, as well as then diving in to the complications with defensive ability and scheming to continue this conversation. I'm also going to add that I know that this episode didn't really shine a good light on Trae Young, but if he's seeing this, Trae, you already know I'm a Hawks fan for life. I use it as fuel. People see, especially on the offensive end, how dangerous you become when you are trying to prove someone wrong. You're trying to respond to the critics. If we can get some of the dog on the defensive end, woof. So, yeah. But other than that, if you disagree with anything I said, and this goes to everybody, not just Trae, if you disagree with anything I said, I love talking hoops, so hit my comment section or my Twitter. But until then, thank you for stopping by, and we'll catch you next time.